Welcome back. You're watching Your World at 10 on CNBC TV 18. Now, the IBM Sun Microsystems talks have collapsed after Sun rejected IBM's lowered bid. So is this the end of the road for that $7 billion mega merger in the technology space, or are talks expected to resume anytime soon? CNBC's Jim Goldman joins us from our Silicon Valley studio. Jim, thanks very much for joining us. Is there any hope left for this deal? I'm reading from one media report that there seems to be a rift at Sun Microsystems with Chief Executive Jonathan Schwartz in favor of a deal and founder Scott McNealy against the deal. Is there any likelihood that talks could resume?
Yeah, you know, you never want to say never when you're talking about mergers and acquisitions in the technology world. Look no further than Yahoo and Microsoft. That deal was supposed to be dead, and yet these two are still kind of sort of negotiating with each other. I think what's happened here is you're dealing with a co-founder of a company in Scott McNealy who's got really big dollar signs in his eyes. He doesn't want to sell his company. You've got Jonathan Schwartz, the company's CEO, who is really, basically enduring a reality check here and sees no other option for the company. And then you've got IBM that's got two major issues on its hands. One is the purchase price, and the other is regulatory approval here in the United States, whether there will be a federal investigation. I think that these two basically were hot and heavy into their negotiations for a very long period of time. It got too much. They decided to go their separate ways, but I think they've gone their separate ways only for the time being. It would not surprise me if these two come back to the table and have yet to work out a deal.
All right, so does this deal hinge entirely on price, outside of the regulatory issues, which are really not in either's control? Does it hinge entirely on prices? And is there any likelihood of IBM upping that, $9 a share price, which was substantially above the price the day before they actually made that, well, they didn't make an announcement before the reports came out, and even higher than what the share is trading at right now?
Sure, and in fact, the original price that IBM was said to be offering raised a lot of eyebrows because it worked out to about a 100% premium. If you remember, it was about $10 to $11 a share, and then my sources told me that was just the cash component of the deal, that there would also be IBM stock involved as well, and that could have boosted the price even higher. When Sun came back, however, to IBM, according to my sources, and said, we want to make sure that no matter what kind of federal heat you get as far as the investigation is concerned, as far as antitrust, we want to make sure that you're going to stick this out, and if you promise us that, we will agree to come in even lower and ask you for a lower price. The real question was then, of course, how low was IBM willing to go? And IBM came back to Sun at $9.40, substantially below the $10 to $11 in cash that IBM was originally offering. I don't think price is so much a sticking point here because Sun shares are already so heavily devalued. Even if IBM were to come back at 125% of their value before this transaction became public, it would still be considered a fairly good deal only because Sun's technology is so valuable and the stock has been so depressed for so long a period of time. And quite frankly, IBM has an enormous amount of cash that it's sitting on. It can easily afford Sun no matter what kind of terms we're discussing here. I'm not sure price is the real issue. I think the bigger issue for IBM is this idea of whether there would be a federal antitrust investigation, whether you go through this entire process only to end it with no deal because the feds say absolutely not. That's probably what's guiding IBM, but IBM needs Sun. There's no question about it, and that's why I think the two will ultimately come together.
Jim, is there any way to gauge whether it would likely end up being a no deal because of the antitrust situation?
It's a really good question, and I think that IBM is doing some serious soul-searching, as we like to say in this country, to figure out whether going through all of those motions would actually be worth it. You know, the fact is, when you look at this government now under Barack Obama, when we have a Democratic president in the White House, the antitrust, the federal investigators tend, at least historically, taken a much more active role in these kinds of deals. We saw it during the Clinton administration with many of the deals that Microsoft was involved with. We took a sort of a breather during the George Bush years, but now we've got Barack Obama in there. It stands to reason that the Justice Department under his leadership will probably take a very active interest in any deal that IBM sets out to do, particularly as it relates into the server market, because IBM already controls such a big chunk of that as it tries to compete more effectively with Hewlett Hewlett-Packard. I think these are real concerns, but again, I think in the end, IBM realizes that Sun is a very important component to how it competes with Hewlett-Packard, and Sun has to realize that it is essentially out of options. It has to get a deal done, and it's already tried to do one with Dell, HP, Cisco, and Intel, and all of them have walked. This is the furthest that Sun has gotten down the road with IBM, and it would be a shame, I think, for Sun shareholders to let this deal off the hook.
All right, Jim Goldman, thank you very much for joining us. That's CNBC's Jim Goldman joining us from the Silicon Valley office to fill us in on whether that Sun-IBM deal is likely to come back on